Board members, we have a very special guest, and because of the timing for our board meeting to accommodate for our many time zones around the world, we did have to change our order of the agenda as we normally do it to allow for this really important guest to come before us and share with us her experiences and what she has learned. So after a short break, we're going to come back together, very short break, just a 5-minute stand-up. We're going to come back together for a fireside chat. And that chat is going to be with a technology veteran, Frances Haugen, about the impact of social media and what it is doing to the lives of individuals and ultimately our society. She's going to especially focus on the impact to our children and our young people. As educators on the front lines, we are keenly aware of the mental and emotional impact this pandemic has had on the lives of our students. U.S. Surgeon General said this: "The last 2 years have dramatically changed young people's experiences at home, in school, and in their communities. It's not just the unfathomable number of deaths or the instability caused by increased food insecurity or the loss of health care or social services or housing. It's also the pervasive uncertainty and the nagging sense of fear. It's the isolation from loved ones, friends, and communities at a moment when human support systems are irreplaceable. We know educators are a vital part of the human support system that Dr. Murthy talks about. We also know our students bring with them all of their experiences through the schoolhouse door to us. So it is critical that we understand each of the elements from those experiences. Social media is one of those elements, and its impact is what brings us to this fireside chat with Frances Haugen today. Through positions at Google, Pinterest, Yelp, and Facebook, Frances has become an expert in algorithmic amplification, the computer code that pushes content to users, whether they have asked for it or not. As Facebook's product manager for the civic integration team, which addresses issues related to democracy and disinformation, Frances witnessed decisions which alarmed her. She looked into those decisions and discovered research and documentation that ultimately compelled her to become the Facebook whistleblower. Frances joins us today to discuss the role that social media platforms have on the mental health crisis confronting our students, the impact it has on our own members, and the future of our country. And then she's going to share with us how we as educators and as the leaders of this nation's largest union can and must use our power to demand change. We're going to take just a short break, but before we do, could you put your hands together for Ms. Frances Haugen? Just a little stand-up break, and I'll be back with you in 5. So welcome back, board members. Welcome into my NEA living room. Now, most of you are used to joining me in my, living area that has a nice fireplace and everything, right? And so you've joined me for other fireside chats, and I literally have a fire. So we're gonna just imagine that we're in my living space and there is a fire, but there's a beautiful plant, so that's good. So we're having a plant side chat here. I am so excited to be joined by Frances Hagen, and I want her to just start off and tell us a little bit about her story, and then I'm going to ask questions. We did send you background information. I trust that you've had a chance to at least glance at it. And we did get some questions in from you, so I'm gonna go ahead and read those questions. If we get other questions, go ahead and put them into the chat. As we have time to get those questions asked, we will. If we don't have time, I know that Frances will help us out, even after our time together. So Frances, take it away.
Thank you. My name is Frances Haugen, and I am a data product manager. I'm an algorithmic specialist, which means that I have worked on experiences like Google search, like the Pinterest home feed, like the photos you see on Yelp, across these different companies. I've worked, while most people who work in my job usually deal with experiences that you can touch, you can see, like there's a button here, there's a box you can enter text into. I have spent over 15 years working on experiences that are, you have intimately experienced, like when you've had a magical Google search result where like it's like Google read your mind. That is an experience that an algorithmic specialist crafted because they wanted you to enjoy it. When I was recovering from being very ill, so I was so weak, I spent 7 weeks in the hospital. I had to relearn to walk. When I was recovering back in 2015 and 2016, I had a friend who was very, very close to me who I originally hired as an assistant, and they became one of my dearest friends. And they helped me relearn to walk. They took me for walks. They taught me how to eat protein and lift weights and all these things. And I credit him with the life that I have today. And I lost him to misinformation. So over the course of 2016, or more like the 6 months before the election in 2016, he started going down these rabbit holes, and he started having more and more extreme ideas. And I would try to pull him back, and he would say things to me like, all the citations you've given me are from the mainstream media. And it was one of these things where I got to experience the powerlessness of what information technologies can do when they lead us away from our shared reality and into these corners of the internet that are divergent realities. And so when I had an opportunity in 2019 to work for Facebook on civic misinformation as part of the civic integrity team at Facebook, I took them up because I never wanted anyone to feel that pain that I felt losing my friend. Because the reality is, many of us know families, some of those families are our own, where we have felt the estrangement and the separation and the isolation of having people we held really dear go down the rabbit hole on the internet. It's not some abstract thing. It is a real harm that tears our communities apart. I think many of you have experienced this with the level of radicalization that has happened around vaccines and COVID over the last 2 years. And my heart goes out to you because I know how hard it is wrestling with those kinds of situations. When I joined Facebook, I came in with my eyes open, right? Like I knew that there were dangers. And once I could see behind the curtain, I was just blown away at how much worse it was than I thought it was. So I think all of us living in the United States have seen what Facebook can bring. The reality is that Facebook has spent an overwhelming fraction of its safety budget on the United States, even though the United States makes up less than 10% of users of Facebook. There's 3.1 billion users of Facebook worldwide, and those users, many of them experience a version of Facebook that has little or no safety features. right? Their languages are not considered important enough for Facebook that they implement a hate speech classifier or a violence incitement classifier. Classifiers are ways of labeling this piece of content is challenging. And so we are about to see a really unique period in human history where the things that we're seeing in Myanmar and Ethiopia, where Facebook has been directly tied to large-scale communal violence. Like we're talking the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people in the case of Myanmar, or the emergent death count in Ethiopia. We're not even fully aware of how bad it is yet. These are the opening chapters of a dystopian novel that I really don't want to read the end of. And I saw that the dynamics inside of Facebook were such that I did not believe there was any way to a solution unless we got the public involved. And I learned this amazing saying. I don't even think my manager thought it was a saying at the time he said it to me. So I didn't give him something on time. Like I was late. And when I gave it to him, he asked me why I was late. And I told him, and he said, Frances, I'm disappointed in you because you weren't willing to be vulnerable with me, like you weren't willing to tell me what was going on or what you were struggling with, we couldn't solve problems together. We don't solve problems alone, we solve them together. And that has been my lens ever since. Like that became a mantra with my boyfriend, like we solve problems together, we don't solve them alone. And I genuinely believe that Facebook needs our help. And we need to help Facebook because we all live here. And we're all living with the consequences of what happens when Facebook systems give the most reach to the most extreme ideas. And so that's my hope, is that together we can talk about ways of caring for our own communities while we push for change. And we can discuss like ways that we can move Facebook forward and move society forward together. Thank you.
Oh, wow.
I know it's a lot.
It is a lot, but you know what? Here's the thing,
Yeah.
as you told just a piece of your story. We all know that we are, as humans, motivated by those things that impact us, but we don't always know the impact of stepping up to that moment.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how that felt for you, how you pushed through it, how you decided that, I don't know about the rest of the board, but for me, when I hear the word whistleblower, I'm thinking, why aren't you hiding in your basement? Why are you letting us see your face? Is that, so can you talk a little bit about your, you shared with us that personal story that motivated you, but my goodness, for you to take these next steps, it's a lot. Can you talk about that?
So I never intended to come out. Like the way my life has unfolded. So there is a very legitimate, a very important path on whistleblowing where you never come out, right? Where you provide information. And a thing I always remind people who work for private companies is, for any company, like corporate interests, is that you are allowed to tell Congress anything you want to tell them. Like Congress as an oversight entity is allowed, doesn't matter what your secrets are, if your company is violating the law, you're allowed to tell Congress about it. And the second thing is if you're a publicly traded company, you're allowed to tell the SEC. So there's a very valid, a very important, and not a well enough known path where people can get information out and they don't have to step out in front of the curtain. The stuff that we're talking about is really complicated, it's really nuanced. Like I have done briefings with certain parts of the government that took hours. And one of the things my lawyers warned me was, there's not an in-between point between you are completely hiding in your closet and you are completely open. Because when you believe that you can be like a little bit in the closet, all that does is it creates an allure and people hunt for who is this mysterious whistleblower. And so they gave me a choice. They didn't tell me how to make this choice, but they warned me of the consequences. They said, if you want to have the impact you want, if you want to be able to go and have those briefings, every time you do that, the circle of trust will get bigger. And security by obscurity is not much safety. And so the thing I'm really grateful about what happened is, I did what I did because I wanted to be able to sleep for the rest of my life, right? Like I wanted to be able to not stay up worrying about what I could have done, right? But what I'm really grateful about having had this experience of having to come out and actually own what I did is that it's very empowering. Like I feel much more peace than I did when I was holding a secret. And I think that's always like an important thing for people to remember is that living a life where you are in the light and in truth, it takes a lot less cognitive dissonance, a lot less energy than living a story. So.
Oh, well, I want to say on behalf of the 3 million members of NEA, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
My goodness. And we understand what it means to build a circle of trust.
Yes.
And that's why you're here today, as a matter of fact, because we have a big old circle. And we want to be in that circle of trust with you.
I'm excited.
Yeah, so as I think about that decision that you made and what you said earlier, so that made me think a little bit differently. You know that I sent a letter on behalf of my 3 million members and millions, tens of millions of students to Facebook and other social media platforms demanding that they begin to reform and be transparent and own the impact that they were having on our kids. And those are the words I used, and well, we won't talk about what happened. I'm all about demanding.
Yeah.
And we will continue to do that because that's what we do. We're an advocacy organization, and we're going to continue to stand up and use our power to do that. But you kind of, when you answered that question, I just was very fascinated by what you said, that we need to help them. I never thought about helping Facebook, honestly. I was not anything I ever thought about.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they don't need help,
No.
but I'm just saying
that
was interesting. We need to help them. So that, I am intrigued by that.
I think the most important thing we should always remember is hurt people, right? And I have so much compassion for Mark Zuckerberg, and I think I'm in this little tiny circle of people who their hearts go out to Mark Zuckerberg. But
you are.
yeah, because think about it. He started this when he was 19 years old, and he had everyone for 10 years, 12 years tell him he was a god. Right, that he was saving humanity, that the Arab Spring was Mark Zuckerberg's gift to the world, right? All these things. Sure. And then one day, the switch flipped. And there's a saying that people who start drinking when they're teenagers, they stay at that level of emotional development until they get clean. And I think there's a real thing where, Mark has set up an organization where negative information doesn't flow to him. And he is, he's completely immune for stock, in terms of shareholders. He holds all the votes, so no one can vote him out. He's the chairman, he's the CEO. And imagine living a life where you couldn't go into a restaurant because people gave you dirty looks. Or imagine you had small children and you were fearing the day they went to kindergarten because their friends might tell them that their father is evil. And I know Mark thinks he's not suffering because he probably doesn't have the cognitive awareness to see it. But until we heal, until we force Facebook to live up to their responsibilities and we force them to fix these problems, he will continue to suffer. And I don't believe in suffering is constructive. And so I want to help Facebook. I want to help all the employees that want to do the right thing internally. And remember, the way our current laws are written, if Facebook doesn't today optimize for profit, as long as they're in the compliance with the laws, they could get a shareholder lawsuit. And so we have to push for regulatory change to make the space for them to grow into the platform that they can be and the platform we deserve.
So talk a little bit about what that looks like. What kind of reforms, specific kinds of things can we advocate for, talk about, build an echo chamber around individually with elected leaders so that we are educating them too?
So one of the things that I'm spending a lot of time on this year is around planting a youth movement. And we want to do it at the level of college students, and we want to do it at the level of high schoolers and junior high kids. And one of the projects that we're going to suggest, because we don't want to tell them what to do, but we want to give them a menu and say, like, we believe these are possibilities that will move us down the field. And I think there's an interesting thing of today, the thing about these platforms is we all only see our individual experience. It's kind of like life. We go through life and we can only see the world through the lens of our individual experience. Like, we can read novels and imagine new ways of living, but that's what we see. Just like that on Facebook, we might see something unpleasant, but the only people who can prove that this is a pattern that lots of people see is Facebook. And so one of the things that I think is actually really important is for us as a community to begin having a list of harms where we're like, we, the public, are articulating the problems with Facebook, and we would like Facebook to disclose what is your plan to fix those. And I'll give you an example. Facebook has come out and said, we are committed to not having people under the age of 13 on Instagram and Facebook. And Antigone Davis, who's, I believe, head of some kind of global safety, I don't know what, she said to the Senate, we care about this so much, we blocked 600,000 under 13s from joining last year. But they also have data inside the company saying that for some cohorts, like age groups, 10 to 15% of that cohort joined Facebook when they were 10. And so there's millions of under 13s that sign up every year. So we have the right as the public to articulate those harms, and we need to push them. We need to keep putting pressure on them and escalating until the relationship they have with the public is one where if we come together and say, keeping people under the age of 13 on the platform is so important, you need to disclose to us how you're going to do it, because I'm guessing you're probably not actually being rigorous enough. And you need to give us enough data that we can hold you accountable. And I want to gather with students and say, hey, academics right now think they know the problems of Facebook. What if we got together and articulated them together? Because your experience as a 14-year-old, as a child living in an economically marginal household, you might have different experiences than I have. And together, that experience of saying, hey, it actually matters that we articulate the truth. And then we together put the pressure on and say, we deserve this problem to be fixed. It's like a pothole. Until we admit, hey, the streets need to get fixed, we can't demand that we fix them.
So I'm going to ask you to dig into that a little bit more, because my heart is singing that you, as you thought deeply about not just where we needed to begin, but as I listened, what I heard was your thinking around centering the movement, this movement, with our youth.
Because they're the ones that are suffering the most. Right? Like there are teenagers that are dying. There are children that are dying. Right? If you're under 18, you are a child. And one of the things that I'm always trying to raise awareness on is Facebook's own documents. They've sent out researchers to go interview young people. Right now, young people are suffering in a way that I think is actually, until I read this, I had trouble. I had never imagined this. So these kids are saying, I can't stop using this. I know it's making me miserable. If I leave, I'll be ostracized. And when their parents or when other people who really care about them say, hey, why don't you just stop using it then? It makes kids feel profoundly alone, and it makes them feel like it's their fault. And the reality, this is not parents' fault, this is not kids' fault. Facebook has built an addictive product, and it's having trouble admitting it's an addictive product. And unless we join together, so for example, let's imagine a PTA joined with a student government and said, hey, let's talk together, let's hold a town hall in our school with educators, and let's say, how many hours a day is healthy to use social media? If you had a community norm and you educated parents in that collaborative way, it's easier for every parent who actually puts a rate limiter on their phone now. Because it's not that you're the mean parent who says you can only use social media for 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day. You're saying, no, half the parents in our school do this now, right? The kids are saying, yeah, it's not like I'm the one who's missing out. All of us are now at least not doing 8 or 10 hours a day, right? And so it's things like that where, finding ways of giving real avenues for young people to both see they have power. They're not powerless. They have ways, like advertiser boycotts can work if we structure them the right way, right? Protests can work if we structure them the right way. Caring just directly for each other, like asking each other's peers, how are you doing? That is an act of resistance. And so I don't know, I'm excited about the next year.
Well, you and I both know, when we think about the powerful, impactful movements throughout history, they've been led by young people.
Yeah, that's
right?
True. Yeah.
When we think just back in our recent history to the civil rights movement, it was middle school kids, right?
Yeah.
And as educators, we often, and parents too, and grandparents, we often hear people diminish our students' ability to be, leaders in this, in right now. And we talk about them. Oh, we need to get them ready to.
Yeah.
But they're ready now.
Yeah.
Right?
Can I tell you a really kind of amazing anecdote? And this will just show you kind of like, we kind of have different relationships with children today than we used to. So one of my life-changing moments was I was in New Delhi for a wedding, and I went to the Indira Gandhi Museum, because I really like museums about individual people. And I fully recognize there are many conflicting issues on Indira Gandhi, but they had little moments throughout her life. And the moment that changed my life was they had this thing from when she was 5, and she led a march of children through the streets of Delhi. And they were called the Monkey Army. This was their own name. And I looked at that, and the reason it changed my life was she, I think, was in her 40s by the time India was free. And I had never thought on that long a time horizon before, right? No one in the world thought India could be free in 1880, and it became free, right? Similarly, like we might need 10 years to figure out a different relationship with tech platforms. But the children of today are going to lead that because they're the ones who are going to be the most impacted.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to the reforms themselves. Nothing that you have shared so far today, at least to me, shows up as something that would in any way curtail First Amendment rights and things, but that's always, especially now, and something that it's something that we do hold dear, right? Yeah. So I did get a question from one of our board members, Andy Slaughter from Missouri, and he wanted to know how could the government reform social media without
so great.
Infringing on citizens' First Amendment rights.
So as I said at the beginning, like the thing that originally motivated me to act was that I saw the impact of these platforms in places in the world where almost the entirety of the internet is Facebook, right? In terms of solidarity with people who have much fewer options than we do. In most languages in the world today, 80 or 90% of the entire internet in their language is only on Facebook. So Facebook is the internet for them. They can't look at another news source. Facebook so far has told us the solution to dangers is censorship, right? They're going to make these magical AIs, and the magical AIs are going to pick out the hate speech. They're going to pick out the violence incitement. But what Facebook's own documents say is that because language is nuanced, right? Like you can take a sentence, and this is a real example from Facebook's documents. White paint colors are the worst. So, white are the worst are the keywords there. Because AIs don't understand context, and they're not going to for a long time, Facebook's documents say the reason why a sentence like that, white paint colors are the worst, got labeled as hate speech is because the classifier just knows that certain words that often are in hate speech were in that sentence. And the thing I am advocating for, and Facebook knows a bunch of these, is that there are product changes that can be made that significantly don't involve content. They involve mechanics of the system that decrease hate speech. So I'll give you an example. On Twitter, to share a link, you have to click it. Have you been oppressed? Has your freedom of speech been ruined by not being able to reshare that link without clicking? Or, so imagine a chain of reshares. So Alice writes something, Bob reshares it, Carol reshares it, and now it lands in Dan's newsfeed. So now we've moved from friends to friends of friends to beyond friends of friends. Imagine if Dan had to copy and paste to share that. So he can't just like hit the button, he has to copy and paste, he has to make a choice. Has his freedom of speech been violated? I would say no, because he can still say whatever he wants to. But that change alone has the same impact on misinformation as the entire third-party fact-checking program. And Facebook knows it drives us crazy when they take our stuff down, either because it actually is problematic or because it's an accident. It drives us crazy. And they want us to focus on it so much that their oversight board actually only has authority to just deal with content takedowns. It doesn't have authority to ask questions on things like, should we cut reshare chains at 2? Is that not crazy? Because we'll argue over censorship forever. But there's so many options, and the reason why Facebook chooses not to do them is when you do something like cut that reshare chain at 2, or require you to click on the link, it decreases the number of reshares. And in some parts of the world, 35% of what people see in their news feeds is just reshares. And so there's dollars on the line. I know.
I can't. You've been writing about and sounding alarm, flashing lights, pay attention, guys. You think what I'm saying is bad.
Yeah.
But let me tell you what's coming. Talk to us a little bit more about the Metaverse. So that's just a little more scary. Yeah, talk to us about that.
So I think a thing that's particularly important for educators, because we can look at it now and say, this is this really non-threatening, silly thing, like, oh my goodness, you walk around and you have no legs, like it's cartoon characters. It looks really non-threatening right now, but I guarantee you the Fortnite of the Metaverse will come along, and every kid is going to want the Metaverse, right? Unless you have one of these headsets, unless you go log on for some number of hours a day, you're going to feel left out. And the thing that I think is particularly scary about this is Facebook up until now has operated a platform it had complete control over. All these problems, it can make choices to fix them at any time. And they are intentionally stepping into a space where now they can say, if someone says, I got harassed in this game, I couldn't go into this space because people were whispering, racial slurs at me, and I can't even tell who in this room did that. Now Facebook can say, we didn't write that game, they wrote that game. But there are lots of choices where we can go in today and say, Facebook, we need to see your plan for how you're going to prevent this. Because there are options. There's things that they could do that are privacy sensitive and would reduce these things. And I think the secondary thing so that's an opportunity where we can raise the alarm today. But the secondary thing around kids' mental health is these systems are going to be much more addictive. And I worry that there are certain things about them that are going to make them even more psychologically harmful. So imagine you're an awkward 16-year-old. I was an awkward 16-year-old, if you can imagine. And you're kind of alone at school. Maybe your home life is kind of unstable. And you can put this headset on, and you can vanish into this world where you are now more suave, all your friends are more attractive, all of you live in better homes, you have better clothes. What does that do to you? Like, how do you sign off of that? And I worry, what does it do to someone's identity formation where at the end of the night when they have to go to bed, they take their headset off and they go to brush their teeth and they look in the mirror and they have to face who they actually are? Like, what is that feedback cycle like? What does that do to how someone engages in the world? And the thing that it's going to steal beyond that self-identity or like that addictiveness is a friend that you make online that lives 3 states away cannot care for you when you're sick. If you have children, that friend cannot pick up your kids from school if there's a car accident and you can't make it, right? Our communities in person are vital for our happiness and for our safety. And I worry that we are eroding all those things by saying that online is the solution.
So even beyond Facebook, just, all of the social media, the impact of all of social media, not only on our students, but you've seen, especially in the last year or two, our educators being under attack, being threatened, and just like the example you gave, going from online to offline, showing up at school board meetings, showing up at their houses, printing their addresses, attacking their kids, physical violence, because they don't want their kids to wear masks. So from, educators, school board members, educators, principals that have been under assault because of the disinformation that's spread, that's being deliberately spread, that is impacting everything, from that to our ability to teach our curriculum. And the censoring of all of these things are happening. So in addition to the impact on the mental health of students, we are absolutely concerned about the emotional and mental health impact on educators. We just took a survey out of the field where 55% of educators in this country are planning to leave the profession.
Wow, 55?
I know,
crazy.
And when we dug into that and took a look at the educators of color, 62% of the black educators that we, 59%, 59%, of Latino. So our teachers of color at a time when we're trying to attract and mostly retain, a diverse workforce, it's having an impact beyond what we could have possibly imagined. Can you talk a little bit about what we can try to do to combat that disinformation and the attacks online that come offline and all of those kinds of things that are having, resulting in what we're calling now, a crisis, a mass exodus crisis, because you don't even know where to fight that enemy.
Totally. It's funny, like people talk to me where like, we had to write up our goals for the nonprofit and like write up the goals for what our organizing goals are. And people will sometimes be drawn to, like we talk about networks of resistance or like resiliency networks to resist Facebook. And they'll be like, why do we need to resist a company? And it really is a thing where we need to acknowledge that violence is happening, right? That words can be violence. And especially when those ideas that are legitimized, when you have those echo chambers, what happens when people have validated the idea that this anger is okay and that the actions they're talking about okay, the consequences are exactly what you outlined, that people show up at their homes or they target their kids. I like to talk about that there are circles of resistance. So we start out, and the very, very first step before we do anything else is we say, I have value, right? I have dignity. Like even if whatever's happening around me, I am still me, and I have value no matter what you're saying to me, right? Because the thing that systems of power do is they tell you you have no power and you're worthless, you're meaningless. So the first thing is that we have to just remind ourselves, and if you have to put a sticky note on your mirror when you wake up in the morning, like anything you can do just to hold to that, no matter what they're saying, just say like, I have value, first step. Second step is we care for each other. And I think it's a thing where, I don't know if you guys already do this, but making sure that every educator has at least one person that they feel really is like their buddy, right? Like someone where you're like, hey, you need to have at least one person you can confide in, and you need to have at least one person where you're like, someone's gonna ask me, how are you doing today, right? Because that also helps you do that first circle of resistance. So we take care of each other, and we figure out ways to do that. Maybe it's pods, buddies, whatever. And I think also just being willing to be vulnerable with your parent population and say, we are struggling, I know you're struggling too. It's hard to be a parent right now. And 2 years in, it's real hard. But saying like, making sure you have some parents for each teacher where at least they're hearing positive things from someone. Because I think the thing that is the most cruel is to suffer alone and suffer in silence. And so I'd say anything where you can do where you can begin, building out that network, that's like the thing we can control. We can always control the first couple circles. And as we get more energy, as we heal, because at some point COVID will go and we'll get a chance to heal. I think there's an opportunity to build that back out. It breaks my heart, the idea that so many educators are being pushed out. My family is a multiple generation of educators. It's, I think, a vital calling, and it's overlooked. Yeah, I think that's the only thing, that's the things we have 100% control over, and we can do that today.
I really do appreciate that your description, that it's a visual description.
Yeah, circles.
Right, the circles,
Yeah.
and I especially appreciate that you started with what we can control, beginning with ourselves, and then building that circle. We talk a lot about, bullying of our students, and we're all trained on what to do with that, and we talk to the kids about making sure, identifying a caring adult in the building and all of those things. So what you just said, I hope is resonating with our educators, that they need that circle. They need that caring adult too.
Yeah.
Right?
And I want to add one more little thing in there, which is, you talk about this idea of with kids who are being bullied, they need to find a caring adult. I am really grateful for educators because I came from a home life where, like, my mother had really profound depression, and my parents were both, tenured professors. They were extremely busy, and I was raised largely by teachers, right? I am really grateful. I am here today because public school teachers looked out for me, right? Like, my debate teacher literally bought me a jacket at Goodwill so I could go to debate, right? Like that kind of thing. And I had trouble finding that, I would have had trouble seeking out that adult because I didn't have an experience at home that told me I had value. And there are going to be educators in your community who, for whatever circumstances they've experienced in their life, have more trouble asking for that help. And I think one of the things that's about those circles of resistance is as we take those actions and we help others, it reminds us of our power, right? And so, taking not just, I don't want to put the whole responsibility on individuals. It's also about, we need to make sure that our fellow teachers know that they can ask. Because sometimes people don't feel like they've been beaten down so much, it's hard for them to ask for that help, right? Yeah. I really appreciate, by the way, board members, if you have a question, go ahead and put it into the chat. Somebody will get it over to me. Let me know. But I really appreciate you talking from your own story. It's one of the things that we're working really hard. Educators are just tend to be selfless people. That cafeteria worker who puts that extra scoop, right? Yeah. The bus driver who decorates the bus for that, for Halloween, and the kids come on and they're all excited. So, they just tend to do that. I don't know what that is about us, that we don't take care of. We don't do that. We don't take care of us, so forget that. Yeah. But we don't understand. But we don't understand always, or we don't remember. Yeah, we don't remember
that we are also human.
We're also human. Yeah.
And that we need that support. And help.
And so giving each other permission to ask for help, that's like a magical unlock.
It is. And, one of the things I've been saying is, because, as a union, we get accused all the time of you just care about the adults in the system, and that's all you care about. And you never, in this January, when we came back from the holiday, and over almost 95% of our schools were open back up to in-person learning. A few decided they would give it a minute and get over COVID and then come back. But most of them were. And within a week, we had schools shutting down across the country. And why was that?
Yeah.
Because the adults were sick.
The adults were sick.
So, you know,
Yeah.
the well-being of the people who are teaching and
Matters.
feeding and nurturing your children,
Yeah.
that's kind of important to the well-being
Of
of
your
your
children.
children.
Yeah.
Let's just be clear about that. So I really, really appreciate that. So talk to us, you know,
Actually,
as
can I give one last little tiny thing, just so we can finish that? I went to a peace seder, like an ecumenical peace seder a couple years ago, and the moment that it stuck with me was, they said that the magical moment for the Israelites was they all were suffering, right? They were all being ground down, working for Pharaoh on the pyramids. They were being ground down, and the thing that God gave them that allowed them to be free was to hear the cries of others, that they all were suffering alone, and then God allowed them to hear their cries, each other's cries, and they realized this isn't just me, this is all of us, and that allowed them to be free. And so I think that's part of why it is that we have to be vulnerable with each other, where we say, I'm suffering, or I'm having a hard time. You don't even have to say, I need help. You can just be like, we're gonna be honest together, because that actually allows us to move forward.
Wow. And that is the first step in healing, right?
Exactly.
So talk to us about, as educators, as you were sharing with us, the realities for our kids, for our students that they're going through right now. And talk to us a little bit about, as educators, what we can do in our classrooms and work sites. And then kind of bridge that as leaders in this association. What can we do as leaders to create that space for that youth movement, to support them in that, and for us to do what we need to do ourselves?
So like we talked about before, like we can focus on what are the things that we have direct, so there's the things that we have direct control over on ourselves is like, I think making sure that you have opportunities to have conversations with kids where you say, I am not gonna tell you it's your fault you can't put your phone down, but I do wanna ask you how you're doing. Because like I wear this little pin, it has a little rose on it, and it's because there was a little girl in the UK who, she was 14 and she died. She killed herself. And only afterwards did her father realize that her phone, her Instagram feed was all self-harm content, right? And just to give some context for educators who maybe don't have children in this age gap, at home, because you don't see your kids after they go home. And, you know, adults can fall into doom scrolling, you know, you're feeling real stressed and you just like dissociate into your phone. Kids do that too. The only problem is if the thing that is making those kids feel bad about their bodies, anxious, whatever, is the content they're consuming, then them self-soothing by looking at that is a very big problem. And you have kids that can't put their phones down to the point where they can't sleep at night. Where, you know, the last thing they see is, you know, this feed that's like feeding their anxiety and they're getting 6 hours of sleep, 5 hours of sleep because they stay up so late. And you know, those kids may be suffering in isolation. Like they might have had a safe parent to talk to, but because parents didn't go through that experience, they don't know how to give the right scaffold to those kids. And so I think even just making space, like maybe you're an English teacher and you have an essay prompt where you ask kids about what's your Instagram feed like. That action might be enough for you to be able to identify, you know, or like ask a prompt on like, what's the thing that makes you, that makes you feel bad on Instagram? Like being able to tell which kids are beginning to suffer eating disorders is really, really vital. Because eating disorders are not about teenage girls that are too skinny. They're about women 60 years from now who have brittle bones because of choices Instagram made, right? That's what an eating disorder is. Or, you know, when a child dies, it doesn't just hurt, it's just not a life ended. I coached debate at a high school that had a suicide cluster. And I watched those kids, like what happened every time there was a suicide, right? And so I think having those opportunities for conversation where kids don't feel like it's their problem and just educating them on like, what is happening to you? Why does this do this to your brain? That gives them at least some awareness and some power. I think the second circle is around educating other parents, educating other teachers. So beginning to draw awareness to that. Like I talked about before, the idea of PTAs can start thinking about what are solutions, what are norms, what are standards that communities want to have. Because I think saying that to kids and saying like, run a survey. How many kids are saying, I think I use more Instagram than I want to? And imagine if you put that graph up in front of a student body and said, guess what? 95% of you wish you used this less. How could we get there together, right? Because I think there are these things where kids are suffering alone and they can't hear each other's cries, or they can't see that there actually is a path forward. So the last question is like, what can you guys do to help us as we bootstrap these things? I think I would love ideas on like, what does a successful event look like? Like if we were gonna make a template for running an assembly, like a school assembly, high school, junior high assembly. I have never put together a high school assembly. I would love help figuring out, if you were gonna do an arc where you want to make it really easy for a high school or junior high to have a week that was about social media. It's like Spirit Week, only we use our phones less at the end. What does that look like? Do you collect information? Do you show kids the social dilemma or something? Like, what is that arc? Because I think there's ways that together we can craft these experiences that leave our educators feeling like they have more agency. Because remember, if you help connect with kids, you connect with their parents too. And one of the things Facebook's own research says is one of the things that's actually limiting kids right now is that the parents can't even recognize that they have social media problems, that they're addicted to social media. And so, what you were saying before about how do we maybe de-radicalize some of the parent stuff? It might be a thing where doing these network interventions, coming in and doing an intervention at the level of a school might actually help calm down the parent population too. Mm.
I have a question from one of our board members. What kind of legislation nationally should we advocate for to protect our kids?
We have to end the dynamic. So I think Facebook has made a long series of trade-offs where they chose profits over people because they knew we couldn't catch them, right? They knew they could say whatever they wanted and we couldn't confirm it. And so there are conversations right now around laws around transparency. And at a minimum, at least for issues involving kids, we need to stop allowing Facebook to just say, this is hard, we're working on it. They have to be able to tell us what they're doing. And they need to start releasing data on an ongoing basis of things like, by the time kids turn 13 or 13 and a half, they know all the kids who signed up early. Because enough kids do wait till they're 13, that you can use those kids to figure out all the kids who lied. Imagine if Facebook published every month, if TikTok and Facebook published every month, how many under 13-year-olds had been on the platform over the last 3 years. If they knew they had to publish that information, I guarantee you they would get better at keeping under 13s off the platform. Right, so it's things like that.
So that might be one of the things that you would use to answer this question. What specifically should we be asking Facebook to do in this moment? And the two examples they gave were stop Instagram kids.
Oh, totally, 100%.
There you go.
100%.
Limit the resharing, and you addressed a little bit about that.
I think there's also, I think we need, why it's like, does any child need to use Instagram more than 6 hours a day? I want to hear that case. Someone make that case to me that a 16-year-old needs to use this more than 6 hours a day, or 3 hours a day. Please justify this to me. Facebook could turn off right now, Meta Facebook could turn off the ability to use it for more than 3 hours for people under the age of 18 today. Like, that's a thing where, like, I don't know what that number is. You should talk to the American Academy of Pediatrics, right? But I think that is such low-hanging fruit, because let's be honest, there are kids who are suffering who, for whatever reason, their parents are not able to put rate-limiting software on their phones. So Facebook coming out and saying parents should put rate limits on their kids' phones. That leaves behind often the kids that are the most marginal. And those kids right now, the kids who are the most likely to end up being over-dependent on virtual social connections are the same kids who don't have in-person social connections. And so having system-level solutions is really important.
Thank you. Another question from our board, do algorithms used by AI and social media foster systemic racism?
Oh.
I was going to say, I think I can
Great
answer
question.
this. Let's say how.
Oh, sure.
Let's put the how in front of
Yeah.
that one.
So I know this one I can answer this one very cleanly because I worked on a project at Facebook, not Facebook, at Pinterest, where we went and analyzed the content that was shown on Pinterest. And the amount of content that was shown of people of color was almost nothing. It was like less than 5% of all the content that was shown was of people of color. And it's not just that there weren't people of color that were using Pinterest. It was that the algorithms, when someone would search for something like eyeshadow, the algorithms do not understand context and they don't understand significance. All they understand is how does this piece of content perform? And so if the, sorry, my phone rang. Oh no, where's Lori? Lori, Alex does not know how to get here because I forgot to send him the address. Sorry. My partner is coming here so we can go directly from here to the airport because we're flying out very shortly after, and I'm a bad girlfriend. So I just want to say that. He is a wonderful and patient man who is delightful. We are all human.
Yes, we are, and it's Valentine's weekend, so.
It is. One of the things that, can you give me the question again? I'm so sorry.
We were talking about racism and
racism.
how.
Yeah, let me finish. So the algorithm doesn't understand significance. All they understand is the performance of this one piece of content. And when people were searching for eyeshadow, because the majority of users were not people of color, it learned if it had to choose between a light-skinned person with eyeshadow and a darker-skinned person with eyeshadow, it learned darker-skinned people with eyeshadow doesn't perform well. And it was one of these experiences where being able to see the data behind the scenes really humanizes problems. So I remember looking at search queries and one of them said, black little princess costume. Right, so you could tell his parent had wanted to make a princess costume for Halloween, or maybe just for dress up for their daughter, and the only way they could put together a board of darker skinned little princesses was to put the word black in, right? And those things have real consequences. And so Facebook knows that on Reels, they have this problem today for the same reasons. It's not that they programmed the algorithm to be racist, it's that they chose not to think about the impact of race. And as a result, these algorithms, they're just hill climbers, and they decided to give more distribution to lighter skinned people because it ended up performing better.
So, and you've talked a lot about the algorithms. One of the questions I want to ask you to explain that a little bit more, what happens in the first 10 minutes.
Oh, sure.
And how quickly can a kid get to a bad place?
Oh, that's a great one. So I think this would be a really fun experiment to do with a class, like if you were a science teacher. So you can take...
Well, I am.
Oh, you are? What did you teach?
8th grade science.
Oh, wow. Actually, this would be a great 8th grade science one because it's so easy to do, but you get to collect data. I'm a data scientist, so I'm all over this. So you can take a brand new account. This has been recreated by a bunch of journalists, by the Senate, all these things. Start out and take something relatively innocuous like healthy eating or healthy recipes and do the searches, click on a couple things. Then each day, just open up that account again and click on the first 10 pieces of content and then close it, come back the next day, do it again. And just write down each day or take screenshots or whatever of what is that content. And very rapidly, so for Facebook, it was within, I think, like 2 or 3 weeks that they started getting anorexia adjacent content, right? So this is things that fetishize, showing your ribs and things like that. And so how do we get there? Like, how does this happen? Or Facebook never set out and said, we want to guide people who just want to eat a little healthier. They don't even want to lose weight, they just want to eat healthier. How do you get from that to anorexia? And what happens is, Facebook is constantly looking at content and trying to guess what's the thing that is you're most likely to elicit a reaction. And the reality is, part of why eating disorders exist is people are drawn to it, right? There's some part of our brain where if we're feeling a little self-critical and we start seeing all these examples of really skinny people, we get pulled that way, right? And so I think just showing to kids, Facebook has said before, I think this would be a really interesting piece to read for kids, is Facebook's head of policy or communications, this guy named Nick Clegg, wrote an article called "It Takes Two to Tango," that said, you claim that we're drawing you to all these extreme things, but you picked your interests and you picked your friends. It takes two to tango, which feels very victim blamey to me. But if in that case, like, I think it'd be really interesting to read that article together and say, what is he trying to do? Like, when he writes this article, what is he trying to make you feel? Like, let's treat this blog post like art. What's the point of this art? What's the techniques he's using to make us feel like it's our fault? And then run that experiment and just go through and have the kids be like, oh wow, like all I didn't have any friends in this account, it's a brand new account. I didn't have any interests. Like, I followed healthy eating. Why am I being shown anorexia content? Right? And it's crazy, like, it's that easy to see.
I can't believe they sent me a card, but your partner is calling, so it must be time to leave. Is there one final thing you want to leave us with?
When I first came out, a number of people were tweeting things like, all this is obvious, Facebook's horrible, we know, yada, yada, yada. And when I would read those, I had a lot of empathy for where that person was coming from. Because when we feel powerless, we can give up to despair, right? We can say, this is insurmountable, they're evil, they're always gonna win. And the reality is, when we give up to despair, we give up our power. And there are certain things where we can never know what the future is. Like, what is the chance we'll be successful at something? But we do know that we can choose whether or not to give up. And I think there is a wonderful opportunity where we can come in and say, we deserve social media that brings out the best in humanity. We need it, right? Society was here before Facebook. Society does not get to outlast Facebook. You know, when we choose to resist and continue to push, that is the path to getting the change we deserve. And I think that there's a moment for youth, especially, where there's a lot of doom and gloom right now about how, you know, there's going to be a rebellion in the United States and civil war and all these things. And having a bridge to the future where you say, no, you as an individual, no matter what happens, you will still have agency, you will still get to make choices, and your dignity is about, like, you have dignity, you have value no matter what's going to happen, and just remembering that you still have power. And so I look forward to collaborating, and I am so excited about the year to come.
Well, you know, this is the third time I've gotten to talk to you. And every time I learn more, and I should have warned, my people should have warned you, but they did not, clearly, because you're here, that you are now in what I fondly refer to, my board members know this, as the Becky vortex.
Uh-oh, our reality distortion fields will mix.
I'm just saying. I'm not letting you go, because we planned to continue to resist.
Good.
We will not give up our power.
Yeah.
And we know we can't do that alone.
Yeah.
We need incredibly courageous and brilliant and passionate and compassionate people like you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us, Frances. You are now, do we have a community ally membership ready? That's what I thought. I'll get my checkbook. I'll write the check for that. You will now be a community ally of the National Education Association.
I'm proud to. I'm happy to be.
Excellent. Give it up, give it up, give it up.